Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Thursday, it is Rob Liefeld Day, so we're looking at the next issue of Youngblood Strikefile, just the Rob Liefeld side. This is issue number 2, cover dated July 1993, if I'm not mistaken. That's exactly it. So this is in around the time after Youngblood 4 and then the continuation in, I think it was in an issue of Brigade or something, where I kind of dropped off with Rob Liefeld. The main reason I was still buying Youngblood Strikefile was for the Jay Lee art, to be honest. And I was still more interested in kind of the Spawn stuff, which that connected to. I was still collecting Spawn, but Rob Liefeld was kind of dropping off for me with the Danny Miki inking, and then again with like not finishing Youngblood in either issue 4 or 5, or this idea that you had to cross over then into Brigade and stuff to finish it up, and Rob Liefeld didn't draw that, finish up that miniseries. It was Chad Yape, who's not a bad artist, as that issue was kind of cool in a way, to be honest. But, just the fact that Rob Liefeld didn't finish it kind of irked me. And then, buying the Jay Lee stuff and then by default having the Rob Liefeld stuff, this issue I think is a good example of why I kind of eventually dropped off with Rob Liefeld. The cover kind of represents that, right? Kind of a really kind of stale trope that he used on the cover here, even back then. So, you always get the sense when someone does a cover like this that they didn't have many ideas, but I mean, it's not bad per se. It's still attention grabbing. It's still got the Liefeld energy. But there's something a bit missing because, as I mentioned before, by this point, Liefeld's being inked pretty much exclusively on all the stuff by Danny Miki, who's a great inker. But I don't think we're getting as much of that Rob Liefeld energy and grit through his inking. He's a little bit slicker, maybe a little bit more like emulating the West Coast look, until he moves on to Spawn and starts inking Greg Capullo and takes on some of the McFarlaneisms, but also starts to really develop his own style, which I think works really well with Greg Capullo. Maybe not so much with Rob Liefeld. Not that it's bad per se. It's not what I prefer when it comes to Rob Liefeld's art and whoever and whatever it's being inked by. Also, I just want to point out that, he's basically playing with, old school iconography of the skull here, right? With Die Hard, we don't have the actual nose of the skull, but that's basically a skull, right? Showing the underside of what's going on behind both these kind of cybernetic bionic guys, right? They're both kind of more Deathlock than Captain America, which is what they're supposed to represent, I guess, kind of. Super Patriot originally, before being changed into a cyborg, and Die Hard has always kind of been like Rob Liefeld's Captain America character. Anyways, so again, why drop off with Rob Liefeld around this time? Covers kind of a bit of that, and as you'll see within the comic, a lot of the reasons is for the basic non-storyline that's going on here. So creator, writer, penciler, Rob Liefeld, inks Danny Miki, color design separation, Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. There's also that I mentioned before too, is the fact that Steve Oliff is doing the colors. I still think the colors were better on Youngblood when Brian Murray was doing them. They were brighter. I think they fit the characters and kind of the subject matter better than Steve Oliff, who I think does a way better job on stuff like, say, Spawn or The Max, right? Slightly darker, slightly less toyish, I guess is how I describe it. Technical assistants, George McCarthy and Paul Scott. I always assume, well, Paul Scott, isn't that his pseudonym for when he inked himself on one? Like, I'm very confused. So technical assistants is basically by Rob Liefeld, because Paul Scott is a name he used at some point to ink himself. Unless there's more to that mystery, let me know in the comments. Yeah, so little things like this, like when you see a gun up here, I think that's George McCarthy doing it, right? And not necessarily Rob Liefeld, because that looks like a real gun and not a Liefeld gun. I'd prefer a Liefeld gun, to be honest. But yeah, so the kind of tropes that Rob Liefeld, attains at this point is this, he's always focused more on the action, for sure, which is fine. But there's always been kind of the, character interaction pages here and there through New Mutants and even through X-Force, which compensate for that, right? But then when you do an issue like this now, this is half a comic. Last issue was 12 pages. This one's actually 16, so that's great. But he's just given us more of the same. There's no, real character interaction. It's just one big brawl throughout this issue. No subplots or anything. So it's really, I could basically describe this issue as Die Hard, gets into cyber data to save Super Patriot, beats up a bunch of guys, meets Super Patriot. Super Patriot is under mind control, so he has to fight Super Patriot, and the issue ends with Super Patriot menacingly holding up some rubble that he's going to throw on Die Hard, as you'll see. So I basically, that's what happens in this issue. Not much. Not, as far as Liefeld's art is concerned, it's great. It's still Danny Miki inking him, so I don't think it's as great as if Rob Liefeld inked himself. But, I mean, Danny Miki does do a pretty good job. It's pretty darn close to Rob Liefeld, pure Liefeld, if you want to describe it that way. And, I mean, there's a little bit of backgrounds that we saw on the first page and on this double splash page, but that's mostly what we're going to get is, like, splash after splash after splash. We're getting 3 panels here. I think this is, like, really the point where Rob Liefeld fully becomes an image artist, if I can put it that way. This is maybe the point, because I still think with the last issue there was still some story going on there. The backgrounds were few and far between, but there was still more story going on, at least, even though it was a flashback to World War II. Here it's just this one huge slugfest, right? He's got some of the background elements, and again, I wonder if it's him or the assistant, but that the kind of stuff that he would do in X-Force he kind of brings back in this issue, which I think is fun. These geometric shapes. But I mean, this is just Rob Liefeld, almost like, is he doing a Youngblood calendar? That's kind of what I feel like with some of these shots, where it's like, after all the shots of him already fighting these guys, do we need, once again, one more big double page splash of him doing it, right? We've seen it at this point, right? Can we get the story moving on a little bit here instead of really, and it's a cool drawing. There's nothing to say about that. It's a cool looking drawing. I do wonder sometimes with Liefeld, we know he does, borrow, swipe, whatever you want to call it, here and there. This compositionally feels maybe just above his usual level in the sense of like the foreground characters and the background characters. I wonder if this isn't from some Jack Kirby comic. I feel like this is something I may have seen in Captain America, right? It would make sense with Die Hard, who's got the shield and stuff. So yeah, again, he's bringing back these, what was inspired by Weapon X, these kind of geometric background shapes. He or his assistants, I guess. And I do kind of like that. I always thought this worked well with his artwork, and it was a good kind of compromise to get some sort of backgrounds, But again, that points back to the fact that Rob Liefeld is mostly always telling the same story, right? Characters breaking into some sort of facility and having to fight off a bunch of, mindless goons who all look the same and have the same uniform to save someone. That's basically the Rob Liefeld storyline. I think that's all of his comics. It happens in X-Force, happens in Youngblood, it's happening in Youngblood Strike Force. So Liefeld does another one of these where you got to go vertical, which I don't really have a problem with. Again, this is a good look at his version of Super Patriot, so I guess that's why he's going big like this. As far as some of the foreshortening and stuff, you should at least get a sense of some of this, maybe not from this angle, but yeah, I do feel like you'd see at least some sort of bicep suggestion. So this choice is a little odd. This is also before Dave Johnson does Super Patriot, or at least it's published. So he's still kind of riffing on what Eric Larson had established in issue 2 of the Savage Dragon miniseries. So it's more of a, Larson take on cybernetics than it is Dave Johnson, because once Dave Johnson actually does that miniseries, Eric Larson himself will adapt some of those ticks in how he depicts the Super Patriot. Man, so many names. In the Savage Dragon regular series, Larson actually changes how he draws Super Patriot to fit more with what Dave Johnson was doing, because it was very cool what he did. He kind of, when someone does something that's even better than your idea, you kind of integrate it, right? But I guess Liefeld hadn't seen that at this point, or maybe it was just too long and hard to draw. A lot of similar shapes also, like these tubes in the background and piping, and then his arms. Like, it's just, seems very repetitive, I guess, is at this point is how I describe it. And again, just a basic, slugfest between mindless killing machine here and Die Hard, who, he's not the Die Hard of World War II, but he's trying to kind of jog his memory back by reminding him of Die Hard from World War II and trying to suck out the human back out of Super Patriot, who's been mind controlled by cyber data, right? And pieced back together as this cyborg here. That was early Image trying to create a bit of continuity there, because cyber data is a Cyberforce villain. But yeah, listen, not much to say here. Like, there's some interesting stuff maybe on this page all of a sudden, and it just, there's no way that's Rob Liefeld. I would, it doesn't look like Rob Liefeld. It doesn't look like anything he's ever done before or would come up with. All the stuff in the back here, the background, this is all assistance, I'm pretty darn sure. And some of it maybe even computer assisted, which is fine. I mean, I'm not against it, but it does kind of work here and look cool. It's kind of a McFarlane approach where you use decorative elements to do the panels, right? You know, he did a lot with Spider-Man, the spider webs, defining the borders of the panel, stuff like that. And all of a sudden there's a grate. So is this like underground downtown or something? Like people can like walk by? Very odd. And the framing on this panel, I think, here is pretty funny. I don't know exactly why, but it's that Bart Sears always said you shouldn't cut things off at the elbows and the wrists and stuff, and like this is, or the knees, and that's, it seems like this is what Rob Liefeld's doing here. So it's, you know, either a sense that he's getting thrown in a direction kinda, or that he's kind of strapped up upside down on some sort of BDSM you know, vertical table or something. I'm not quite sure. And this is how the issue ends, with Super Patriot, you know, picking up debris from I don't know what. You know, it's all in shadow, so who knows? There's kind of rocks and stuff that you just cut a hole in the ground and pick up, you know, a chunk of concrete. Not quite sure. You know, this angle is kind of unfortunate. I gotta say, sorry, but I'm gonna point it out. This here is pretty phallic. It's got like a veiny shaft and a knob there. So I often think anytime Rob Liefeld draws Die Hard from the back, his head does end up looking kind of like a dick. So just pointing that out. And that ends it for the review of this, because, yeah, exactly. We don't want to go over the Jay Lee stuff just right away. Give you a little glimpse of that super awesome cover, which right away is, I think, overall better art than everything I've seen the Rob Liefeld side of things. In this issue at least. So there you go. My maybe not so positive review of Youngblood Strikefile, but those are my feelings about the issue. So if you have any thoughts, concerns about this issue, let me know in the comments below. Any questions, ask away. Those of you who are subscribed and are still watching, thank you so much for still being there. Really appreciate it. Those of you who are watching but are not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a second and it really helps the channel out. Helps get us out there to like-minded people who are into the same stuff that we are, namely comic books. So everyone out there, have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13. 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!